Hi, this is me, the stick figure historian, and this is episode 35 of the American series. I think. Oh, yep, it's 35. So, in our last episode, the Texans were still going after the city of Bexar. James Bowie, the crazy knife fighter dude from Kentucky, just won the Texan army a better camping site at Mission Concepcion, along with the help of James Fannin. But Steph and Austin decided they couldn't make a full assault on the city since they didn't have enough men, and then everybody started complaining, and he was getting really fed up. So, after this, 600 new troops filed into the Texan camp at Mission Concepcion. More ardent spirits that Stephen wanted and yet didn't want on his hands. The trouble was, even this didn't prepare them adequately to make a rush on Bexar. For General Martin had received a band twice that number of Mexican soldiers at the very same time. Things were much the same as they had stood before. Whilst all this was afoot, a soldier-statesman named Sam Houston was traveling to a meeting of the Texian consultation, set to meet in San Felipe. But when Houston arrived in the town, he found out that most of the members weren't there. They had all tired of talking and had decided to join the fun in Bexar instead. If Houston wanted to go forward with the meeting, he was gonna have to go fetch him back. He saddled up and settled in for another long ride. Stephen caught sight of the swarthy Houston later, wandering about the Texan camp as he rounded up the stray consultation members. All at once he saw in the man an answer to all his troubles. Houston had military experience. He had served like a hero under Andrew Jackson in the Indian Wars and during the War of 1812. He had the charisma it took to lead a bunch of rambunctious troops. Stephen went to Houston and begged him to take his place as commander of the Texan army. But Houston wouldn't accept. He had come on a mission, and he was going to finish it. Stephen was on his own. Thanks to Houston, it wasn't long before the last missing member of the consultation was finally seated in his proper place, and the long-awaited meeting commenced. It was a big issue that rested before them this time. They were to determine whether Texas was fighting this war merely in support of federalism or for independence' sake. Talking, debating, and arguing went round and round the circle of men, and at long last a conclusion was reached. Officially, Texas was standing for federalism. They weren't ready to ditch Mexico altogether yet. But that wasn't all the consultation was considering this time. They also talked much about the organization of the army, especially about the leadership of it. And, much to Stephen's relief, it was ruled that Houston should indeed take his place as commander of the whole army of the people. The unfortunate thing for Stephen, however, was that Houston was not given command over the volunteer troops at Bexar. That responsibility still lay in his hands. The siege dragged on for several more weeks. Texans began to disappear from the ranks. For some, it was their homes and families that called them away. Others were simply tired of sitting around doing nothing. Stephen knew he needed to do something fast, or he was going to lose his entire army. The numbers went up a bit come the middle of November, when more volunteers arrived from the United States. This time, they included an actual trained regiment, the New Orleans Greys. Stephen's confidence was boosted by the sight of their official uniforms and careful drilling. Maybe they could get somewhere with men like these. He took a vote among the men to see how many were willing to try for an attack on the city. The numbers weren't in line with his hopes. Only about 100, mostly the new recruits, were in favor of the notion. Utterly discouraged, Stephen gave up his post as commander.
You can't fire me, I quit.
And Edward Burleson, his second in command, stepped up in his place. So, it was back to sitting and doing nothing. Back to monotony. And then, at last, something happened. A Mexican mule train was spotted heading for Bexar. The sacks on the backs of the animals drooped, full of something heavy. Gold, the rumors ran. Silver! Money to pay the Mexican troops in the city. Excitement stirred the stiff limbs of the Texan volunteers, and there was talk of little else in the camp. Burleson sent a very eager Bowie out to investigate the matter. The orders were to avoid a fight if possible. This was strictly to be a scouting mission. There was a clamor among the Texans then, as every man offered his arms in the service of the man with the big knife. Only a lucky 100 were chosen in the end. It probably didn't raise Burleson's confidence, though, when he noted that the 12 prime shots in the camp were among those that Bowie picked. But what could he do? Bowie was simply the best man for this job. Bowie and his 100 were soon in the saddle and speeding across the plains in search of bravado. Meanwhile, the mules and their sombrero-clad muleteers plodded along through a peaceful valley, making their way towards Bexar. They had no idea what was about to hit them. A cloud of dust appeared on the ridge, and Bowie and his riders came streaming down with guns blazing. So much for a scouting mission. Well, what else could Burleson have expected of the knife fighter from Kentucky? They poured down upon the muleteers and drove them all away like frightened cattle. Eagerly, the Texans tore a pack from one of the mules' backs and slashed it open. Out poured clumps of green grass. Every sack was filled with nothing but grass. Feed for the starving horses in Bexar. The men returned blushingly back to camp, with nothing but a stammering story about the fabled treasure. The grass fight, as it came to be called, is a striking example of how foolish a man can be when greed is his only aim. November finished its course with no further event, and Burleson suggested that they should retreat to Goliad for the winter. The officers were outraged. All this waiting and doing nothing, and now they were going to just leave? All their work was wasted. For one of them, this was the breaking point. Ben Milam would not go back, nor would he wait any longer. He would die or conquer. He stepped out into the midst of the Texan camp and raised his rifle. Who will go with Ben Milam into San Antonio?